Little cold in here today. So I got my extra layers on. I left the window open because I like the nice breeze that comes in the morning, but the day hasn't warmed up. If anything, it's gotten colder. So dark clouds are rolling in. So it's going to be a fun weather day. Rise. Rise. So Rise is an interesting song. I often, for many of my songs, I work on them for a very long time. They're not complicated. My songs tend to be very simple affairs. I don't. I don't perhaps go into the sophistication that a lot of people do, but it takes me a while to arrive at the simplicity that I'm looking for. So I do. Well, and there's when I'm writing a song, I tend to. There tends to have been just some feeling that I'm chasing, and then I throw everything against the wall and try and get something to fit that feeling. And this can drag on for years and has, and it's it's just the way I do it. I guess if I had deadlines, if there was people waiting on me, I'd probably change my process. But there's no need. It's inherently these songs are a personal thing, so I go about it in a personal way. So yeah, I spend years tweaking these things until I feel they're a pretty good match for that feeling that I'm after. The reason I go through all this is Rise is one of the rare exceptions where it was written and recorded very nearly on the spot. For no good reason. I just, I get things in my head and I start imagining that there's a rush on things, and I do it. What had happened with this one is we we had recorded 5 songs with Scott, and then the bass player, not Chad. Let's call him Saul Goodman, because he was always wheeling and dealing, and he had kind of this aw shucks demeanor, and was had the appearance of a non-pushy person, which you kind of let down your guard around him. But he was always working things, always looking for the angle that he could extract the most benefit from. Which I guess it's ironic that on the flip side, he was also a person that nothing ever really worked out for. He was just a perpetually bad luck, hard luck fellow. If you gave him $20 by Monday, he'd owe someone 10. He was just that type of fellow. But he wanted to throw in a couple of covers, which was a fine idea, but he well, the one he wanted to do was it was like a Led Zeppelin song, and it allowed him to really show off what he was good at. Nothing wrong with that, but it also really exposed what I wasn't good at, which was, well, pretty much everything. Everything except Desire. Yeah, I was only good at Desire. But and also for whatever reason, I didn't think of getting Scott on the phone and calling him back to record another 2 songs. I didn't really know him at the time very well at all, and I felt it was he had already did me a huge favor by dropping by and doing those, and maybe I didn't want to impose. I don't really remember, but again, I didn't know the guy well at the time. But today I'd have no problems, and he'd probably tell me no. I'll we're good friends nowadays, but yeah, he doesn't. He'll still do drums under a certain circumstance, but he I perhaps take a little too long in how I go about things for his liking nowadays. I'll probably talk more about that when I get into a time of madness. Saul, so we did up a couple of covers, and they were very sorry, sad affairs. Big problem was we didn't have a drummer to record anything with, so I took it upon myself to do the drums. Why I thought I could play drums, I have no idea. But so I set up the drums, set it to a click, and played these very pitiful tap, 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 tap. And it probably would have been better had I just used the click as the drum track instead of my performance. So we kind of did these very weird things that was supposedly a cover, but was so far removed from the actual song that I think it was unrecognizable as the song we were covering. Saul liked it because he got to play his fancy guitar all over it. I don't take that away from him. And we did plan to put it out with the album. It would have been embarrassing, so I'm glad we didn't, but we planned to. But at that time I had it in my head that I was really excited that I was putting out music, and I wanted to just go through the motions of what it was to put out music. So I wanted to do all the licensing and stuff. And I mean, today, YouTube or CD Baby or what have you, they all kind of take care of that for you. It's very easy to do. Back then, that was all still being figured out. It was so when I contacted the people responsible for licensing, I just ended up with emails full of legalese, word salad, and just bizarre and expensive requirements that just seemed a little out of place for the scale of what I was doing. And I mean, I think most people who were doing what I do and just go ahead and release it, and if it becomes popular, well, then they just deal with it then. But which is probably was the right way to go about things, but I had it in my head that I just wanted the experience of going through the motions, but the motions were not very practical. So so once I kind of got through communicating with the licensing people, okay, I'm not dealing with any of that. So I just threw them out, and but still felt the need for 7 songs. So what I did was I took those sad drum tracks and just wrote a song over top of them. And with how that worked with Rise was I had another song that I was just finishing up called Stars that I had a set of lyrics for. And very late in the process of Stars, lyrically I took it in a different direction, but I still had this collection of words that I liked and enjoyed and wanted to do something with. So I try and hold a passing thought. Yeah, do these words not fall apart, and so on and so forth. And I like it. It tickled me. I really wanted to do something with it. So I took those, and that's how I got started with Rise. Was I started with the lyrics first, which is also kind of ass backwards. And then I just started throwing in all sorts of parts and just threw everything I had against the wall to see what stuck. And I think I think it's a really neat song. It's a part of me kind of feels I think had I lived with it for a few more years, it probably would have been neater or better. So I always kind of wonder, I bet this really could have grown into something, but I think it's all right for what it is. It's really for a song written on the spot. It's long and it has lots of parts to it, and it's and of course it has lots of little lead things in the background for Saul. So why do I call him Saul Goodman? This is also the first track that Mike played on, and playing drums on a song that's already recorded is it's usually a bad idea because it takes a lot of skill to do that well. The normally songs are played with the drums first and everything layered on top. And if you do it the other way, you tend to end up with an out of joint feeling. Things, the beat just doesn't seem to sit right. It doesn't have that quality where it's leading the song anymore. It's kind of it feels like it's always falling behind, unless you have a really skilled drummer that can adjust for that. And that's kind of the that's you know that's a studio level professional guy would still probably have difficulty getting it right. And Mike, who had never played drums before in his life either, this was the first thing we asked him to record. The most difficult task you can imagine. And I think he did an excellent job with it, actually. I think the drums on there, they have a little bit of feel to it, and they hit their mark very well. And it's amazing that he could come in and in learning the drums in as short a time as he did and pull that off. Why did we have a drummer that didn't know how to play drums? Okay, this is where we come back to Saul. Um, Saul worked at the same place as Mike, and one day Mike was at his station drumming with his hands to whatever he was uh, thinking of in his head. And Saul saw that and was like, that's a drummer. We need that guy because his hands are drumming really well. So Saul comes to me and tells me he's found a drummer. Great drummer. This is what he's telling me. He's telling me he's found this guy. He's a great drummer, fantastic drummer. Used to play in high school, but now that he lives in an apartment, he no longer has his kit and he can't. He has no place to practice. So he is a little rusty, but he's a great drummer. He's a great drummer. I said, okay, great. We could, yeah. Let's get it over. Let's jam in, and yeah, I would love to have this great, fantastic drummer as part of our little club. And so so he brings over Mike. So Mike is all I don't know what he told Mike. Maybe I'll get Mike on here and we'll ask him. And so he brings in Mike, and so yeah, Mike comes over this one day, and he sits down at the kit, and so we start playing a couple of songs, and it's your typical popcorn, pum, 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 pum. He doesn't even know where to put his hands or feet properly or anything, and it was just a big kind of jumbled mess, and I was like, oh. Okay, but Saul was like, no, he's rusty. He's rusty. He just needs to warm up. It's he hasn't had a kid. It's rusty. Just let. I was like, okay, okay, he's rusty. I am not a very accomplished musician, so I don't know. He tells me he's rusty. Okay, it's fine. He's rusty. So this went on week after week. We just kept going week after week. He kept returning, and the rest. the rust fell away little by little by little. And at a actually at a certain point, we we rented him an electric kit and sent him home with it, and said, "Well, why don't you, de-rust yourself? You just here's something you can tap on in between jams and stuff." And to Mike's credit, now I still, after every practice, Saul was coming up to me. It's like, hey, he's an ace drummer, just boom, 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 boom. This guy's crazy good. He's just rusty. We just got to work out the rust. And Mike's learning. He's not only is he learning, but he's learning with no teacher, no reference, no nothing. He's just coming by each week, making it up as he goes along, really on the spot because he has Saul Goodman there, convincing him to come back each week and that, let's keep going. So he's kind of, he keeps coming back. So I was fine with him keeping him back. I mean, there wasn't any competition. There wasn't a lineup of other drummers. We had not breaking down our door to come in. So it was just fine. And to Mike's credit, once he got those electric drums, he practiced on them so frequently and so intensely, he got kicked out of his apartment. And it was a basement place too, so he must have been hitting them pretty damn hard. And in just a few months, we were already playing a few shows with him, and it really wasn't until years later that I ever knew that he had never played drums before that moment. And so, yeah, that same year, as he became clear that he was getting a grip on things, I started in on, okay, well, let's start recording things. Because I always wanted, for me, recording was always the big thing. It was always take or leave shows, but I always felt recording should be the priority. So I really, so I had him replace the drums on Rise and Come Down, which I'll talk about next. And he did, and he did fantastically well, and I'm really glad he did. The video for it is also kind of interesting. A lot of people bring that up. For me, at the time, the video is the sort of thing that you can accomplish when you're unemployed for an extended period of time. So going through a bout of joblessness, I set out to learn this program called Blender, and so I created all the elements of it when I had much time, and fortunately, because I was making that video scene by scene without any plan. I was just making it up as I went along. I sort of decided on a cast of characters, created those models, and just went scene by scene and threw them in as I felt they would be needed. But I did get a job, which kind of interrupted it about, maybe, a few early on in the process. And what I did was I got into a routine of every day before I started work, I would carry along a notebook and sit at a coffee shop. 20 minutes each day, I just kind of went over what the story of that thing would be. So I ended up creating all the parts to it, and then I stopped myself, went back, and over a couple of months, just went over and just created an appropriate, doable story with what I had. And I think having that pause and just forcing myself to sit down and write a script for it really helped end up with a video that made sense, that actually I think is a lot more impressive than the song it's attached to. And and that was a really a good lesson for doing anything video wise, because when it comes to video stuff, I really have a tendency to just get excited by the graphics and just want to jump in and just keep working on those and start to kind of write it as I go along, which is a mistake. You tend to end up working on things for long periods of time that aren't needed, and you also tend along with that, you just end up wandering around, doing lots of unnecessary work without your story in place very early on in the process. Um, and so that's how that came about. And yeah, that came out in a couple of stages. It was made before the song was recorded. And early on, it had some of my very early, um, very hard on the ears music on it. And it was, for a while, it was a very popular video on YouTube. And then I took it down because then I put it back up as the video for Rise a few years later. So it's, yeah, yeah. So it's a cool video, neat song, a amazing job by Mike on it, and even Saul Goodman. He does pretty good guitar work on it. I think he always liked that song, and I was always pushing to play it live because um, he especially when we played it live, he'd put down the bass. Do we even have bass on that song, or is it just two guitars? I don't think there is even a bass part. Yeah, because he just played guitar and did the lead thing. He was actually more of a lead guitar player than a bass player. Um, I don't know why he decided to play bass. He didn't actually own a bass. He always played my bass. And there's a lot about Saul I can't figure out. I'll talk more about that in the next video, maybe. I think I've chatted quite enough for one day. Take care. Bye-bye.